Good morning, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 5 summary. The game is now turned solo because Hilltop Pillbox has returned home. We played for 12 or 13 hours yesterday. So if you want to see the first round or the first 4 rounds, go to the Hilltop Pillbox channel. He has done a round by round summary there. I'm going to continue on doing my best to represent what I think the Hilltop Pillbox would do. This game yesterday was a lot of talking about the rules. What do we think? How do we interpret things? So the game necessarily wasn't played in a let's get it done scenario. However, there was lots of cool stuff that happened, and we have no idea what's going to happen if this was going to be a 15-round game. So I will get into sort of the continuation of what happened. So let's start over here in the Pacific Theater. Now, it's every playtest game that we've had so far, and CB's Bill has commented on this, is that there seems to be fighting all over the map. From turn 1 all the way to turn 15, you're just engaged, fighting all over the map. The Hilltop Pillbox also commented on this yesterday, because I've never played 1936 before, and I asked him, what are the similarities or differences? And he said the one thing that he likes about 1939 is the same thing, that there is a constant battle or fight every round all over the map. So at the end of round 4, the Allies were set to do a massive landing in Western Europe. So and Hilltop and I talked about this yesterday. So what can the Japanese do to get the Americans to turn around? Because currently the Axis are at 12 victory cities, and Paris is under threat. So they're going to need to gobble up some more in the Pacific. So the Japanese went and took the Bonin Islands. They built an air and a naval base there, with 4 loaded naval transports to go and threaten Hawaii. And the American fleet was here. And so, do the Americans want to sacrifice giving up Hawaii to the Japanese, or what do they want to do? Well, I thought, what is the Hilltop Pillbox? What would he do? Well, he loves submarines. So first, the Americans dispatched the Japanese sub in the convoy zone box, and they built another 6 submarines on their own, and they backed off their fleet. They also built a fortification here in Hawaii, and they scorched all of their naval and air bases. And because we have stickers on the map, we just use these HBG acrylics, and we flip them upside down to denote that this air base and naval base has been scorched. So America has done that. They currently have 3 infantry, an artillery, a fighter, and a fortification. So the Japanese are coming with, 8 ground units, all infantry, some SNLF, and they can within range 1 fighter. So do the Japanese sacrifice their fleet or their ground units to take Hawaii, knowing that America does have a follow-up counterattack? So that is going to be interesting how that plays out. And the Hilltop Pillbox and I have both been a little off of our, maybe our A game yesterday, because we forgot to do some things. Well, the Japanese saw this opportunity to take the Dutch New Guinea, and they did it specifically because there is a naval base here that the Anzac did not scorch earth. However, they did scorch earth this one on this turn, knowing that. But why these naval bases are significant is because from here, all of a sudden, Sydney is under threat, because the Japanese can come 1, 2, 3 down to this territory here and do a landing in Sydney, and also prevent the Australians from building any navy. So the Australians saw that coming. They scorched this naval base. They cannot give that up to the Japanese, and they moved their navy over here. They also built 3 armor back in Sydney, and they decided to move their naval transport to safe waters over here, because this Japanese navy is just too big to contend with. The Japanese now control all of the Pacific Islands except for the Dutch East Indies, which is still under control of the Anzac. Now, something else, originally when we were designing this game, the hilltop pillbox was always felt that yes, Calcutta can fall to the Japanese if the Japanese want Calcutta. However, there is a price. And the hilltop pillbox has done a fantastic job with the Russians, with the KMT and the CCP, just building a horde massive army and keeping the Japanese pinned along the coastline of sort of the eastern Chinese territories. The Japanese still do control Hong Kong and Shanghai. They do have a industrial complex here in Shanghai, but the Japanese do not want to build any more because at any time, if the KMT wants, they can come and take it. And these black chips represent 5 infantry, so I'm going to say roughly there's 30 KMT infantry on the board, and the CCP is right behind it on the northern flank. And the Russians have done a very good job with their limited infantry and artillery. The Japanese had some fairly horrible dice last round. They went and took Vladivostok and they lost 5 infantry or something taking it from the Russians, who rolled very well. And the Russians have just managed to just filter a couple infantry artillery to the eastern front or the eastern Siberia region to sort of keep the Japanese pinned down. And the one thing the hilltop pillbox he's been very cautious of is not getting the KMT or the CCP forces too close to any coastal territories, because that does put them within range of all the Japanese aircraft and naval transports, which would do probably mutual destruction. And considering now the KMT is sort of limited in sort of producing, the units that it can produce because the Burma Road is closed, that they do not want to lose their horde of infantry. The Japanese did take the Philippines last turn. As you can see down here, the British fleet has sort of retreated away from Cairo. The British did dispatch all of the Italian and German ground forces out of the Middle East, which is a bonus for them of 5 for controlling all of the Middle East territories, plus whatever the territories are worth. So that's really a 9 or a 10 IPP swing in favor of the British. So that was huge there. The Italians tried to counterattack the British ground units in Iraq, and they did not roll very well, and the British did, so they retreated and survived to fight another day. Down here in South Africa, the South Africans, in help with the British, have just managed to build enough to be a nuisance to keep the Italians from expanding down to South Africa. The Italians decided to move their fleet out of the Mediterranean, and that is to maybe pursue the British fleet, or maybe they've got some naval transports, or maybe start to threaten South Africa. So does this force this massive medium-sized army from backing up to protect South Africa? So that is going to be a sideshow there. Now, I guess what you guys are probably wanting to see is the Allies did do their D-Day invasion. Their first invasion of Western Europe was not when they decided to use their combined American, British, and Canadian and Commonwealth attack. They decided to do it this turn. So this currently, I think I just counted, there's 34 ground units. They're all sitting in Normandy and likely for the game. So Paris is definitely under threat. Currently sitting in Paris, there's about 10 infantry, combined Italian and German infantry. So it's currently under threat. The British could have actually landed 4 more ground units. However, they decided to do a landing in Norway for 2 reasons. One is to negate a Russian or German NO bonus of 5 for controlling Denmark, Norway, and I can't remember something else. But also because if the Germans control Moscow, all of Finland, and Norway, Sweden becomes pro-Axis. And so they are trying to prevent the Germans from turning Sweden pro-Axis and annexing the small little navy down here with all these ground units. And why is Moscow under threat? Well, Moscow is under threat, and it is going to fall likely in round 6, and that is because when the hilltop pillbox was in Orlay Kursk, he decided to attack the large German stack, and he miscalculated how many ground units were there because I had black chip. Anyways, bit of a mistake, but what that did, and that attack wasn't that bad, but what that did is it locked all of the Russian army sitting in Orlay Kursk, and there was, I think, 17 ground units there, and the combined German counterattack was over 30 units with their aircraft, and they absolutely decimated the Russian forces in Orlay Kursk, which was unfortunate. And so I had to do some thinking, some strategy, and this might not have been what hilltop pillbox would have done, but I thought, what do the Russians do here? Because Moscow was going to fall based on the amount of Germans that are now sitting on the doorstep. So what do? How do they survive another day and fight? And as we know in this game, if Moscow falls, the money does go to Germany, but on the next turn, the capital moves to Novosibirsk. So do the Russians want to, survive and fight another day and force Germany to keep spending money and worrying about the partisans? So they decided to downgrade their major factory in Moscow to a minor. So if it's captured now, it is destroyed, and retreat their forces out and put up a quasi-defense. They put a blocker here to protect Stalingrad from falling. And so they also backed that up Karelia, and they still have about 20 to 25 ground units, just not defending Moscow, sort of retreating back. And they did do a build here in Novosibirsk. There is a major factory here. There's a train there. They decided to build a T-34, a couple of Katyusha rocket launchers, an elite guard, and they still have an air transport. So Russia is going to survive and still be a nuisance for the Germans. We're still going to have to fight. Germany is still fighting a two-front war. So another little wrinkle here is Germany is basically in a world of trouble here with the Italians, because once the Allies do a landing in Western Europe and Paris is going to fall, is what do the Allies do? Do they take a poke or a stab or a run for Rome, or do they go for Berlin? And it's when you see this naval fleet here, and they've got, say, this amount of ground units, all of a sudden Western Germany is under threat. And if Western Germany falls, that means Berlin is going to fall. So the Allies have to be very careful in counterattacking now into France, because they have to protect the homeland. So you are going to see the Allies completely gobble up all of Western Europe and France until they decide at which point in time, and they can decide this any time, which direction do they go? Do they head south towards Italy via ground? Or they could even decide to swing around and go through Gibraltar and capture Italy, because when Italy falls, it remains part of the Allies for the rest of the game. So that is going to be an interesting dynamic. Now, if the Americans continue to build, they did build some stuff in the Pacific last round, but they still built. They've got 10 more transports that can come over next turn, and the British did a maximum build with the Canadians here on the coast. So they're going to be dropping off at least 20 ground units, probably more like 30 every single turn in Western Europe. And so once Germany, Germany's going to have to decide, do they want to continue to fight for Moscow and Leningrad and Stalingrad? There's also, once the Allied fleet is here, there's nothing stopping them from going into Denmark, and then doing a 1-2 punch, and then maybe going to liberate Leningrad, or do a landing over here in Poland and take back Warsaw. So that is a massive amount of problems for the Germans and the Italians to deal with. Something else to point out, because the sort of a sideshow, but because the Allies did do a landing in Western Europe, that does trigger automatically the German rocket attacks. So the Germans did do a rocket attack on London, and the Allies got to decide where the rockets did their damage. They had one successful attack, so they did 2 damage to the naval base here off of London. So that is what happened there. And I think anything else? Sorry for the long summary, folks, but man, I just wrapping up here, I want to say that it was probably the most fun game, because I haven't had the chance to play test this very much 1v1 face to face with another person. So yesterday was probably one of the most fun games of Global War 1939 that I've had. So thank you, Hilltop Pillbox, for coming out. And I will slowly, over the next few weeks, as I do the final updates and the rules, try and get these round summaries out to the community. And thanks for watching, folks, and have a wonderful day.